All right, so I just got a chance to check out the new Peacock limited series titled Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy, which if you're confused, as I was a little bit, especially if you've seen the other series titled John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise, literally just the reverse title. So that one with John Wayne Gacy at the beginning of the title is the documentary series, and I have not seen that. I heard about it though at the time, and so when I saw this, I'm like, what? Is it? Did they do some like typo here and they're just re-airing the series or something? But no, that was the documentary series. Now this is another kind of, I believe that was at Peacock too or through Universal Productions, but this is a fictional, scripted, well, not really fictional because it's based on a true story, but scripted with some creative license taken and that kind of thing, a narrative story here with actors, and we have a writer's room, everything like that as the normal show. But you can see, at points definitely that it is taking some of those aspects from the documentary. I mean, literally in just these first few episodes that I have seen that I'll be talking about here, they include real footage of the events and the incidents and the people that are being portrayed by actors in the show. Not a lot, but just at the ends of episodes and stuff like this to kind of keep that in there. So, anyways, confusion aside, yes, this is a different series and it is kind of the scripted version. Why they decided to title it the same thing only in reverse, God knows, right? It was very confusing. But anyways, beyond just the title, so I'm going to talk about the first 3 episodes here that I have seen. And I think that's a really great, kind of vantage point. I think 1 episode would not have been enough to kind of share my thoughts on. But having seen 3 and just getting the sense of like the overall structure for the show and kind of where things are going to be going, especially with the titles of the episodes, you can kind of put 2 and 2 together. And I think my thoughts on these first 3 episodes will pretty much stay true, even if, when I get to and if I get to, the end of these 8 episodes when the series is done, right? It's just that kind of show where you can kind of tell exactly what you're gonna think. So, and of course it's based on a true story, so obviously we know how it ends, right? There's not going to be some twist, surprising ending or anything like that that we don't see coming. But what I really want to talk about with this, and this is something that I've talked about on the channel a couple times before, and that's with kind of, it's really a big, broader discussion about, serial killers, obviously with John Wayne Gacy being one of the most, infamous ones. It's this broader discussion of how we kind of portray them in media, right? Especially in, TV shows, movies. A show like Mindhunter to me, was, I guess one of the first TV shows that I had seen, I think, again, like a scripted, fictional, show. Again, the word fictional maybe doesn't fit exactly right because it's based on true story, but you know what I mean, right? A scripted show. That was probably one of the first ones that I saw. And I thought they did such a good job, with especially season 1. And I had a couple issues with the way that season 2, went about, especially with the character in the show, but obviously based off the real person, Ed Kemper, and Cameron Britton, an amazing performance in season 1. And the way that they handled that character in season 2 kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It almost became this kind of, and he's only in a few scenes. It's not a huge deal. I still really like season 2. But it is kind of approaching that kind of sensationalism of these characters, making him out to be kind of this, villain, kind of like the Joker, when you're just like anticipating him being on screen and, and even going to the extent, and not necessarily saying Mindhunter does this, but I'm going to get to, of course, Monster, the Netflix series with Jeffrey Dahmer in the first season. It's almost kind of making these serial killers, these real life monsters, right? Given that title, kind of anti-heroes in a way, right? And it's just like, I don't know. I think that's just really the wrong approach. And obviously, that's not a hot take. I see everybody agreeing with that. But it is kind of a really odd thing, that has happened. And then obviously a bigger discussion could be made about, how the media, the traditional media, news media, portrayed these killers back then and still now, right? The way that we talk about them and all true crime and all the stuff about this. And so to me, this series completely gets it right. And I would even go as far to say that it's the best, thing that I've seen. And maybe I haven't seen all of them, obviously, but it's, to me, the best way to do it. And reading into this series before it came out, I think a few weeks ago, I knew that Michael Chernus was going to be in the show. I think I did talk about this on a live show on the channel. But anyways, just quickly to recap, Michael Chernus was saying, I didn't want to do this show at all. I don't want to play John Wayne Gacy. But the way that these scripts were written and the approach that they were taking, that made me, sign on. That made me kind of justify this and made me, want to play this character and be a part of this. And I can see it. And even reading those comments, I kind of was hesitant. I'm like, okay, really? Is he just saying that? But it really is that way. The way that we, again, for these first 3 episodes at least, but I don't see any change in that, the way that they tackle this story is just so kind of refreshing, especially compared to something like Monster, especially the Jeffrey Dahmer season, and even season 2 with the Menendez brothers, right? Again, there's some other circumstances there, obviously the father, playing a role in that, but at the end of the day, they're still, multi-murderers, right? Murdering both their parents, I believe, and the way, and they, come on, they're kind of anti-heroes, in season 2. I think that's fair to say, at least one of them, right? To make these kind of, real-life killers, these serial killers, and, double murderers, whatever, it's just very strange, the way that Ryan Murphy and Netflix has decided to do it. And in this, it's almost the complete opposite. It took me a little while, actually, to recognize how, refreshing this was, but it truly is. I counted, I think, only maybe 1 or 2 scenes in total of these first 3 episodes where you really are, actually in the shoes of John Wayne Gacy, or even a scene is playing out, from his perspective. And that's pretty crazy, right? Again, Monster, Jeffrey Dahmer is our main character, really. And then we have kind of side characters who are the victims, or his neighbor, in the apartments and stuff like that. And this show is, really, if you think about it, John Wayne Gacy is not our main character at all. And the overwhelming majority of the scenes that he's in are scenes where he's, the supporting character, or, usually we're introduced to the character that's anchoring the scene, and then they kind of run into John Wayne Gacy, or, he comes in, the scene because they're there, that kind of thing. And so he's very much, not our main character, not an anti-hero in the slightest. And in that way, it doesn't kind of, they don't give him a villain arc, and stuff like this, or, an origin story, and none of that. He's really just almost kind of in the background. Obviously, he's a big character because he's, causing all the stuff that's going on, and, the title of the show is about him. It's about, his attacks, his victims, but he's not, a main character. He's really not that pivotal, to the actual core story and the characters that we're really following, which are, the detective, played by Gabriel Luna, right? James Badge Dale, who is the chief, I think, or one of the other, the detective's boss, essentially, at the department. Marion Ireland's character, who's the mom of, the missing boy, the most recent boy, that was John Wayne Gacy's victim, which, helped them catch him. And so these are the characters that we're really mainly following, and it's really only when they interact with Gacy that we're actually meeting him and spending time with him. And so to me, it really feels like we don't spend a second too long with this guy, than we need to. And that's I don't know, that seems more appropriate. That seems it's well done in that way, to do that. And it really, again, it isn't sensationalizing it. A lot of other, shows, even Mindhunter does this a little bit, is that kind of, I don't know if this is the exact term, but to me, it's that gratuitous violence, right? A lot of these shows you see, okay, you'll see a dramatization or a scene where, the serial killer, locks somebody in the room and then, tortures them, or you watch the evil acts that they're doing. And then, they kind of build in the creepy music, and they build this up. And None of that is in here. It's very matter of fact. We don't see any stuff like that. I mean, we really don't see any, at least for these first 3 episodes, but I feel like they're going to continue this. We don't see any of his crimes actually taking place that he's done. Even like abducting the kids, nothing like this, or kids or young adults. But anyways, yeah, so it's really, it's just impressive to me, the way that they've been able to do this, and it's still intriguing. Now, I will say, I think the first episode is the strongest, just in the way that the structure of the show, because after that, especially in episode 2 and 3, and then you see the titles of the episodes, it's very clear what they're going to be doing going forward, is that they're kind of covering a victim, a specific story, or multiple victims in some cases, in each episode, and kind of showing us who they were, who those victims were outside of Gacy. And the really interesting part that really kind of blew me away, and that I quite like actually, is that we never actually see these victims meet up with Gacy at all, at any time. And that's, again, it's kind of subverting that, because the whole time I'm watching the second episode and we start getting introduced to one of his victims, and you figure out pretty quickly, okay, this is the guy, that they're talking about, this is his victim. I'm waiting the whole episode to see, okay, when is he going to meet up with Gacy? When is Gacy going to take him? Are we going to see what Gacy does to him? When is this coming? I'm waiting the whole episode, and then the episode ends, and I'm like, oh, maybe in episode 3 we'll see what happens to him, and then episode 3 is on a whole different character, and we don't see him again. So that, to me, is just really interesting. Like, now, I do think, to be fair, there is something to be said there that, yeah, it's not as compelling. Right? It's just not as compelling, to see, obviously, I guess the payoff, really, because they do set it up a little bit. The victim usually mentions Gacy in some way, especially episode 3. I think it ends with kind of the victim saying, I'm about to go meet this guy for this job, right? And obviously they're referencing Gacy. And so, yeah, would it be more satisfying, to have a payoff like that as, in a kind of narrative series like this? Yeah, right? And that would be one of my, criticisms, I guess, of the way that they're doing that. But I also think it's a positive, because it's just subverting that, instead of, making you wait, to see Gacy take him, or see that kind of, the evil act that he's about to do to them. But instead, no, it's just focused on the victim's life and who they were before they were taken, killed, and this terrible thing happened to them. Also shows their family members, too, who were obviously greatly affected by what happened after they were gone. And so, yeah, I just think it's a really interesting approach, to all that. So that's kind of the main focus I wanted to go into here with the show, is just how impressive that was. And it really is a bit of a risk that they're taking. Now, again, do I think this is a masterpiece? One of the best shows of the year? I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm quite there yet, because, I have a couple other criticisms I'll get to in a second here. But it's just the way that they've decided to approach this, and the way that they've executed it flawlessly, in my opinion, in the way that they're doing it, was just really impressive to me. And even though, yeah, it may not be the best show of the year, that alone, to me, makes this probably the most impressive, show about serial killers, true crime, and this type of thing, just because of the way they're subverting it and taking this different approach. So, definitely, kudos to them for sure on, what they've decided to do. And again, maybe in later episodes, that they might show some of this, and maybe, what I'm saying might end up, not holding true the whole way through, but it doesn't seem like that. It really feels like they're taking a specific approach, and that's going to be how it is. Okay, so obviously I have to talk about Michael Chernus before I'm done here. He is unbelievable in this show. Obviously from Severance, love him in Severance. He plays Rickon. He's really great in that, and I was so excited to see him in this. To have this kind of meaty starring role in a show, a very different role than Severance, where I think you can see, that he has that ability in Severance, and so to see him in this, he was even better than what I thought, and my expectations were already pretty high. He's just really great of nailing the accent, Some of the parts, where he gets a little more stern, he nails, and you really feel that kind of frightening, you're scared of this guy, right? And as you should be, because of the stuff he's done. But then on the other side of what made him, obviously for bad reasons or for bad outcomes, but it made him effective at, getting away with this for so long, is the other side of him, the upstanding citizen, the guy who was like deeply involved in politics in the city, dressed up as this clown, of course, where he got the name the Killer Clown, and all of this stuff, right? And so he just nails that, the kind of, I would even say the kind of like good old boy, kind of persona, that he puts on, that he gets along with everybody, he helps out, the young kids in the neighborhood and stuff. And then obviously he's doing all these sinister things, behind that facade. And so I think he nails, completely. I think he really, really nails the character so far. Maureen Ireland's really great, as the mom. Really heartbreaking performance from her. James Badgedale is pretty good as the detective. Gabriel Luna's been pretty good as the detective, as the main detective, I should say. So yeah, all those performances, and there's some other cast members in here that have been pretty good. And then, yeah, I mean, beyond that, right, the criticisms, yeah, I mean, some of the writing here is, pretty cliche. It's nothing, groundbreaking or anything like that. And some of the performances are a little iffy, especially some of the teenage kind of child performances in and around the cast here. But I also don't think this show has like the biggest budget ever, and so because really, if you think about it, like the biggest name here is probably Gabriel Luna in the cast, right? And so and even the writers and directors involved are not really big names, and so. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty forgivable, if some of the cast isn't as good and some of the writing isn't, insane or, next level impressive in this stuff. But, and that's part of it, right? But the only other thing I guess I would say is just, I guess I already talked about really the structure of these episodes. And what else surprised me about the structure of it is just how the first episode almost really just feels like a kind of a complete, capsule of the story and of who Gacy was. And then there's still 7 more episodes of the series to go. And the next 2 that I watched, I was still very interested in, found very compelling, and I was really, loving the approach that they were taking to things, as I've talked about. But it was a little peculiar, just like seeing that, I'm like, oh, there's 7 more episodes here to go. And so maybe I think they could have maybe stretched out, that first episode plot a little bit more. They jam-packed a lot of stuff in that first episode. Though, again, like, I really liked it, though. And I think to me, it might be up there in some of my, top episodes of the year. I really liked the first episode. So, anyways, it is kind of going along with just their general approach to things, which I do really love. So at the end of the day, maybe it's kind of a mixed, reaction to that as well. But anyways, I think that just about does it for all my thoughts here on this series. Some of the cinematography, some of the shots are really great. Really liked one of the ending shots of, I think it was episode 3, I want to say, where, we're getting into Christmas time, right, in the show, and this case is going on, and all of the houses in the neighborhood, it's this great aerial shot, and all the houses in the neighborhood have Christmas lights on. It looks very, cheerful and festive in the season and everything. And then, they see you can see Gacy's house, and it's just pitch black, right? Because they're trying to still excavate, these bodies from below his house, that are buried there. And obviously he doesn't have Christmas lights on. And so it really, pinpoints, I think it's, maybe this is too long of a talk about a single shot, but it really is a great way of just showing, here's this neighborhood of all these people, just normal people going about their lives, putting up Christmas lights. They're in the spirit of Christmas and the festive season. And this whole time, in this kind of maze of houses that you see in this, suburb of Chicago where it happens, there's just this one kind of black spot, of the whole neighborhood. And it sticks out, right? It sticks out. And, the funny thing is that Of course, it didn't stick out, and that was kind of the whole point, or the whole reason, why he was so effective is that he kind of blended right in. And now, once everything has come out and he's been exposed and, he's been arrested, everything, all the news is there and everything, now it's very obvious, that one little, spot on the map that that's now dark. And it has been for many, many years, and people just didn't know. So anyways, really great shot there. There's some other great shots that I thought were really great. So yeah, really, really positive, on this series. Again, is it one of the best series of the year? Probably not. Probably not. It's probably up there, my top 10 or so far. But yeah, there's some things that, definitely could be improved. But overall, really, really recommend the show if you want to see a kind of different approach to serial killers and have not been really a fan like myself of Monster, the Netflix show, maybe even some elements of Mindhunter. This is the show for you then. I mean, this is really great, and I think it deserves some eyes on it, just for the approach alone and what the kind of risks that they've taken that have really paid off so far. So anyways, really great series here, really worth checking out. And definitely, if I do check out the next episodes here in the next little bit, definitely I might come back again and do a review for the whole series and kind of share my thoughts on how everything wraps up. So stay tuned if you're interested for that, and definitely let me know so I can go ahead and do that video as well. But anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Love to hear your guys' thoughts, of course, on the series if you have seen it or if you haven't, and you're thinking of watching it. Love to hear from you either way. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you then in my next video.